All right, we are waiting right now on the left of your screen in Mar-a-Lago, Palm Beach, Florida. Of course, the president's home there, former President Donald Trump's home. He was with Speaker Mike Johnson. They'll be announcing some common ground they have found on a number of issues, including settling, it seems to be that Pfizer surveillance thing that was looking precarious for a while. It seems to be back on, and we'll explore that in greater detail. I mean, on the right of your screen, the New York courthouse, where, of course, this hush money trial begins on Monday. Donald Trump is set to become the first former president ever to face a trial on felony charges. Andy McCarthy with me on Now What's at Stake. Andy, always good having you. 34 counts here that are in question. And again, most of it having to do with falsifying, hiding business records and the like. I'm just wondering whether there's a great deal of redundancy in the counts in the first place, whether they overlap. I mean, the odds of escaping conviction on all of them seem pretty high, but what your thoughts?
Well, it's tremendous redundancy, Neil. In fact, it's just a kind of charging practice of stacking counts and turning one offense into multiple offenses that if you're in the Justice Department manual actually instructs federal prosecutors not to do. What Bragg has done here is take one potentially misdemeanor violation of the business record falsification statutes and turned it into 34 felony counts. The way he does that is this one transaction, this one repayment of $130,000 was paid in, I think it was 11 installments. He's taken, with each one, there was an invoice supplied, a book entry, and a check cut. Instead of just charging it as one big scheme, he's charged each piece of paper, each of those three things with respect to all 11 installments as separate felony counts. So instead of having a misdemeanor, what you have is 34 felony counts that could result in over a century of imprisonment in theory.
You know, I'm just wondering, Michael Cohen is key to this, of course, the so-called former fixer for Donald Trump. If you're the defense, you really want to go after him and rip him to pieces, right? Yep.
Yeah, it was just 2 weeks ago, Neil, that a federal judge in New York who has Cohen's case there, he's still under post-sentence administration from when he did the 3-year sentence in connection with some fraud and tax counts some time back. The judge found that he either committed perjury when he pled guilty in the federal case, or he committed perjury when he testified in the recent civil fraud trial in New York, or possibly both. So that's just 2 weeks ago, and he had kind of a spotted record even before that.
You know, so many of these felony counts, if they reduced or they could work out, I'm talking about the Trump defense team, to misdemeanor counts that don't carry nearly the weight or certainly nearly the potential of jail time. How would a strategy like that go?
So here's what I think I would do. If obviously you have to see how the trial goes, but if I'm Trump and the Trump defense, what I'm going to do is ask for a lesser included offense instruction to be given to the jury. Here, the misdemeanor count is falsification of business records. The greater felony charge is falsification of business records to conceal another crime. What I want is a jury instruction that says if they don't find Trump was trying to conceal another crime, they can convict him on the misdemeanors. The reason I'd be asking for that as Trump's attorney is that the misdemeanor count has a statute of limitations of 2 years. If that's all they convict him of, that count lapsed in 2019. So then you could argue that the case ought to be thrown out on that ground.
Is he up? That is the former president. I mean, this is the most liberal of liberal cities, and I'm sure they can find 12 jurors. But the odds of finding 12 who would be sympathetic to the president's view, the former president's view, I don't know how that process goes. But in this city, I imagine that would be a little difficult.
A little difficult, Neil. But let's also factor in the guy who really needs 12 is Bragg, right? What Trump needs is 1.
Good point.
You know, because a mistrial for him would be a major victory. If the jury were to hang in this case, I think that would be spun politically, and in fact, it would be legally a real coup for him. And I wouldn't just write off Manhattan because someone like Alvin Bragg gets elected in Manhattan. The number of people who actually vote in those elections is vanishingly small compared to the number of potential jurors in Manhattan.
Okay.
And yeah, I'm not saying Manhattan's anything but a blue borough, but Trump lost Manhattan probably by 2-1, maybe a little bit more than that. Having 30% of 2 million people who are potentially, in your corner, so to speak, or at least people who are open to your case, if you're a defendant and you just need one, that's not inconceivable by a long shot.
Yeah, you hit on it. All it takes is one. So we'll watch closely. Andy McCarthy, great having you. Thank you very much. Have a good weekend.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.